Well, hey everybody, it's Mr. Schauber, and welcome to our presentation on coaches in college basketball history. The thing we have to remember about coaches is that oftentimes the coaches are there at a school at least traditionally, you don't see this as much anymore, but traditionally coaches could be at a school for 20, 30, 40 years. Players are there for 3 or 4 years and they leave, but coaches traditionally were there for a long time. And so really, when you think about college sports, you kind of think about coaches, when you think about certain universities. So anyway, the coaches, of course, play a huge role in recruiting and how successful or not a program is, obviously. But oftentimes these universities basketball programs are defined by their coaches. So let's look at some of the greatest coaches in college basketball history. It all starts with Phog Allen. Phog Allen coached numerous places, most famously Kansas. Uh, he is nicknamed the father of basketball coaching. You can see there on the bottom right, he is with the founder of basketball, okay, James Naismith. Um, Adolph Rupp, legendary Kentucky coach, Dean Smith, legendary North Carolina coach, played for Phog Allen. Um, Phog Allen had himself played at Kansas under James Naismith, the game's inventor. And you can see his overall record there. I've always included the overall record of these coaches throughout this presentation. He had 590 of his wins at Kansas. In 39 seasons at Kansas, 24 conference championships and 3 national titles. He got second place in the NCAA tournament twice as well. The home basketball arena at the University of Kansas is called Allen Fieldhouse, of course, named in his honor. And he also was the coach in the 1952 Olympics and won a gold medal there. So the father of basketball coaching is Phog Allen. As mentioned, one of Phog Allen's players at Kansas was Adolph Rupp. Adolph Rupp coached Kentucky for over 40 years. The Baron of Bluegrass was his nickname. 876 wins in his coaching career. You can see he's fifth all time in wins, and at 82.2% winning percentage, that's second all time. He won 4 national titles at Kentucky and went to 6 Final Fours overall. 27 SEC regular season titles and 13 SEC tournament championships. Of course, Phog Allen, like we talked about at Kansas, coached a number of guys who went on to be great coaches, but none were greater than Adolph Rupp. 5-time National Coach of the Year, 7-time SEC Coach of the Year. Of course, the Adolph Rupp Trophy is given to the men's top men's basketball player in the nation. And Rupp Arena, which is where the University of Kentucky plays, of course, named after him. So Adolph Rupp, one of the greats. John Wooden is the most accomplished college coach in history as far as championships go. But John Wooden was great as a player before he became a great coach. He played at Purdue University in the 1930s, and he was the first player ever named 3-time consensus All-American. He was a tremendous basketball player at Purdue, which is in Indiana. He was the 1932 College Basketball Player of the Year, okay, and he led them to a national title at Purdue that year. So John Wooden was an accomplished player before he ever became a coach. He, like I said, he was a great college player. Then he went on to have a really good pro career. Now pros were in its infancy back then. These were the first first years of pro basketball, and the players didn't make a lot of money, and it wasn't like a big thing back then like it is today. But Wooden was a really good professional player for a number of years too, and then he got into coaching. He started out at Indiana State University, which is where Larry Bird would eventually play many decades later, right? And then he went to UCLA. and he was at UCLA from 1948 to 1975. His nickname became the Wizard of Westwood because his teams were so dominant for so long. You can see he won 664 games in his career as a coach, 10 national championships at UCLA, back to back in 64 and 65. Didn't win it in 66, but then all he did was then go on to win 7 straight from 67 to 73. Of course, he had Lou Alcindor, he had Bill Walton, and he had other great players also, but he was what a masterful basketball mind he had. And then he won another one in 75. So he won 10 championships in 12 years. Can you imagine that? And he went to 12 Final Fours overall. 7-time Coach of the Year. UCLA had a record winning streak of 88 games while he was coaching. He coached 4 perfect 30-0 seasons, won 38 straight games in the NCAA tournament. I mean, these are things that are never going to be duplicated. Nobody will ever do these things again. It's crazy. Uh, Inducted to the Naismith Hall of Fame as a coach in 1973, and he was the first person inducted as a player and a coach. Pretty awesome, right? The John R. Wooden Award is given to college basketball's best player, like the Heisman Trophy in college football. And John Wooden was a devout Christian. He preached really high moral and ethical standards to his players. He looked at his players as his boys, his sons, and he was going to teach them and make men of them. He wanted them to be great people, not just great basketball players. And so he is known for his 7-point creed and all of his inspirational quotes. He passed away in 2010 at the age of 99. He lived a long and productive life. But his 7-point creed that I just mentioned were things that he would always try to ingrain in his players. And you'll notice how many of them have to do with basketball, right? None of them, really. They're all about being a good person and a productive member of society. And so number 1, be true to yourself. Number 2, make each day your masterpiece. 3, help others. Number 4, drink deeply from good books, especially the Bible. Number 5, make friendship a fine art. 6, build a shelter against a rainy day. Number 7, pray for guidance and give thanks for your blessings every day. What a good man John Wooden was, no doubt about it. Let's look at some pictures of him. And here are some pictures, right? Uh, Man, he just was he's the kind of guy you would want to send your kid, uh, you know, to be a player for. You would send him to UCLA because John Wooden was going to teach him not only basketball, but life as well. So there he is, the Wizard of Westwood. Denny Crum was the legendary coach of Louisville for 3 decades. Uh, you can see 675 wins, 2 NCAA championships, 23 tournament appearances, and 6 Final Fours during his career. 3-time National Coach of the Year, and in 2007, Louisville's home floor was officially named Denny Crum Court. Denny Crum was a fierce competitor, extremely smart, an excellent recruiter, and coached a bunch of All-American players, and his players loved him. And so, yeah, Louisville. I grew up watching Denny Crum coach for Louisville for quite a few years, right? And he was, he rarely got out coached by somebody else. He was just fantastic at his job. Dean Smith coached at North Carolina from 1961 to 1997. I always loved Dean Smith, loved watching him coach, loved watching his teams play. Um, he also coached the U.S. Olympic team in 1976 and won a gold medal doing that. He's 4th all time in most wins in college history, had 30 seasons with at least 20 wins, including 27 consecutive seasons with at least 20 wins. Um, he was ahead of his time. He promoted desegregation by recruiting the school's first African American scholarship player. This is, it's hard to imagine basketball in general, college basketball, pro basketball, without a lot of black players because they kind of dominate the game now. But in the old days, it was, certain schools especially just were very segregated, and North Carolina had been like that, being a southern school, and he said, no, we're not doing that anymore. We're going to have black players, white players. I don't care what color, as long as they can play, and we're gonna do things that way. He won 2 championships, 1982 and 1993. He went to 11 Final Fours. He was just always in the mix. North Carolina was always just seemed good while he was coaching. He went to 27 tournaments during his career. Also won an NIT title in 1971. He was 4-time the Coach of the Year on a national level and 8-time ACC Coach of the Year. At the basketball arena at the University of North Carolina is called the Dean E. Smith Center, widely referred to as the Dean Dome. So Dean Smith, one of the good guys in college basketball, and one of the great coaches ever. Bob Knight was the legendary coach at Indiana, but he also coached at Army and at Texas Tech, and he was successful everywhere. He's nicknamed the General. He was tough. He was, he was ultra competitive. Some people would say poor sport at times too. I mean, he was on referees. He was in the face of his own players. He was the general. Yeah, he was like the George Patton of college basketball coaching. He's third all time in wins with 902, 3 NCAA championships, all at Indiana, and he led Indiana to 5 Final Fours overall. 11 Big Ten regular season titles at Indiana as well. He's won numerous Coaches of the Year awards. Um, on a national level, an 8-time Big Ten Coach of the Year. Never had a losing season at Indiana. Always was a winner. He was also the coach of the 1984 gold medal Olympic team that featured the likes of Michael Jordan and Patrick Ewing and Wayman Tisdale. Uh, Bob Knight had been a tremendous basketball player before he became a coach, and he had played at Ohio State, went to 3 Final Fours as a player, and won a title in 1960. So he was, he was a master at motivation. He was a master at getting his players, ready to play a big game, and he expected perfection, right? He would practice, and he expected his players to do things as they had practiced them, and if they didn't, he would sit them down and get somebody else in there, and his players knew it. I think they respected him in a lot of ways. They probably feared him a little bit, maybe a lot, but Bob Knight was definitely one of the great college coaches ever. Lute Olson coached at numerous places, but most famously at Arizona. Um, Won a national title with Arizona in 1997, and 5 Final Fours overall, one with Iowa and 4 with Arizona. He led his teams to 28 NCAA tournament appearances, and at Arizona, he won 11 Pac-10 regular season championships. Um, Twice he was a National Coach of the Year and 7-time Pac-10 Coach of the Year, twice the Big Ten Coach of the Year at Iowa. He uh, he was just a winner. He made Arizona into a national powerhouse out west when he got there. UCLA had always been awesome. USC had been up and down, but at times up out west. But out west was not known for a lot of great college basketball teams. They were mostly back east and in the Midwest. But he made Arizona. He put them on the map as far as a force to be reckoned with in college hoops. Jim Calhoun was a fun guy to watch coach. Coached at Northeastern for about a decade and a half, and then he went to the University of Connecticut, UConn, and coached for 2.5 decades there. He was an awesome coach, tough nosed, knew his X's and O's, knew the game, and became a tremendous recruiter. University of Connecticut, uh, he turned them into a national powerhouse. He won 3 titles, in fact, at Connecticut in 3 different decades: the 90s, the 2000s, and the 2010s. reached 4 Final Fours overall. The thing was, when UConn got to the Final Four, they usually won it. Okay, they won the whole thing. 7 Big East tournaments he won, and 10 Big East regular season titles. In the 80s and into the early 90s, it was usually Georgetown. It was St. John's, sometimes Seton Hall, sometimes Providence. It was Syracuse. These were the teams that were winning in the Big East, and uh, Jim Calhoun, you know, by the late 90s especially, UConn was starting to dominate. And the Big East was one of the best, if not the best, conference in the country for college basketball for many years. So UConn definitely one of the creams of the crop in college basketball under Jim Calhoun. He was the he was 4-time Big East Coach of the Year. He was named the National Coach of the Year as well. First coach in NCAA history to win at least 240 games at 2 different Division I schools. So he was successful both at Northeastern and UConn. But yeah, he was a winner, no doubt. He turned UConn into a juggernaut. John Thompson was awesome. Big guy. John Thompson had played for the Boston Celtics in the 60s, won back-to-back titles, 65, 66. He's like 6'10", just big dude. Okay, so you can imagine how imposing he was on the sidelines. He coached at Georgetown from the early 70s to the late 90s, and he turned Georgetown into a powerhouse. He won a national title in '84, became the first African American head coach to win a major collegiate championship. Went to 3 Final Fours in 4 years. Okay, during that time, 24 postseason appearances he led Georgetown to in his tenure. He was a National Coach of the Year. He was Big East Coach of the Year. Won almost 600 games in his career, and famous for the towel. Always had a towel over his shoulder because he'd sweat during the games. He'd get all worked up and sweat, and so he had the towel there to wipe off his forehead. And oh, he was, but yeah, he was a character, old John Thompson. But he's one of the few coaches who could look all of his players in the eye, or basically, or was looking down at them. Um, he was imposing. So, but he became a master recruiter as well, and got a lot of great players to come to Georgetown over the years. Rick Pitino, coached from 1978 all the way to 2017, won 770 games in his career, and Rick Pitino had a very successful career. Coached most famously at Kentucky for almost a decade, and then at Louisville for over a decade and a half. 2 national titles, one with Kentucky and one with Louisville. The only coach to lead 2 different schools to a national title. He was successful everywhere. 7 Final Fours, National Coach of the Year, Conference Coach of the Year. He had it all on his resume. He was tough nosed. He was the kind of the Italian, sharp dressed. I mean, people thought he was in the mob. Kind of that New York accent. Okay, New York, Boston. The Northeast accent kind of thing. He was, but he knew his basketball, no doubt about it, and a great recruiter. Uh, Convinced some of the greatest players in the country to come to his schools, and coached a bunch of All-Americans. And yeah, Rick Pitino was a fantastic coach. He also coached in the pros for a while. You'll see in between stints there, between Kentucky, he had so much success at Kentucky, and then Louisville. There was a 4-year gap there, and he actually coached the Boston Celtics for a while. So not near as much success in the pros as he'd had in college, but he did it all, no doubt. All right, now here are a few coaches who are still active. The ones we've talked about previously are retired, but here, as of today, in the year 2020, um, these are coaches that are still active and doing their thing in college basketball. You got to start with Coach K, Mike Krzyzewski. He had played college basketball at Army, okay, West Point at Army for Bob Knight. And then he coached Army from 1975 to 1980. And then he got hired on at Duke. And from 1980 until today, 2020, 40 years, he has been at Duke. He is the most winning by by wins of all time in college basketball for coaches. Most wins ever. 5 NCAA titles, 12 Final Fours, coach multiple coaches of the year. He was an assistant coach uh, for Team USA for a number of years for during the Olympics. Then he became the head coach. Um, he's won 3 golds as head coach for Team USA, 2 as an assistant. Of course, the court at Duke is called Coach K Court. Um, but yeah, he's won over 1,000 games in his career and counting. And so Coach K is amazing. I've never been a Duke fan myself, but I like Coach K. I would want him coaching my kid. He is a good man and he is a tremendous coach. Jim Boeheim is the coach of Syracuse for over 40 years, and he's second all time in wins, only behind Krzyzewski. Uh, and Boeheim has a national title to his credit, 2003. He's gone to 5 Final Fours. He's won a bunch of regular season Big East championships, um, and he just a tremendous coach. Syracuse has been to over 30 NCAA tournaments under his watch. National Coach of the Year, Big East Coach of the Year awards. He's also an assistant for the Olympic team. Has won a couple gold medals doing that, and he tough nosed. I mean, all those Big East coaches, especially in the 80s, 90s, 2000s, they're all tough guys. Yeah, I mean, it was just a cutthroat conference, and so yeah, some of our greatest coaches have come out of there, but Jim Boeheim definitely he is a legend, living legend in college basketball coaching, no doubt about it. And John Calipari, you talk about another guy like Rick Pitino, right? The Italian, sharp dressed, $1,000 suits, could be in the mob. That's John Calipari. Coached University of Massachusetts for a number of years, very successful there. Then he went to Memphis, tremendous success, and then since 2009 he's been at Kentucky. Uh, Very good recruiter. Always gets a bunch of high school All Americans to come to his schools, and he just gets some of the best players in the country. A lot of his players, are kind of the one and done guys, especially in recent years. He gets these guys to come to Kentucky, and they're just highly touted out of high school, and they're really good players. And then they leave after a year or maybe two to go to the NBA. So it's hard for him, probably, as far as continuity. He doesn't have many guys who stay 4 years, but he has won a title. Won in 2012. He won a championship with Kentucky. He's gone to 6 Final Fours, uh, one with UMass and one with Memphis, and then 4 with Kentucky. Um, Coach of the Year, awards and stuff. Now the thing is, he's gotten in trouble pretty much everywhere he's been, especially UMass and Memphis. That's eventually what kind of forced him out. Was he got in trouble for recruiting violations and NCAA violations in general. And so he's willing to push the limits, and some people would call him a little shady, but whether he is or isn't, he definitely is a tough guy, tough on the sidelines. He expects his players to get the job done, and he works them hard, and he's been very successful. And Roy Williams. Roy Williams seems like such a good dude. Coached at Kansas for from the late 80s to the early 2000s and was extremely successful at Kansas. And then went back to his alma mater, North Carolina, in 2003, and he's been there since. He's won 3 titles at North Carolina, coached in 9 Final Fours. In fact, he was 4 of them were at, or excuse me, I believe 3 of them were at Kansas, and then or maybe 4 of them at Kansas, and then 5 of them at North Carolina. But he's had some of the great teams in recent history, especially at North Carolina, some of the most dominant college basketball teams I've seen. Uh, in the 2005 team, the 2009 team, they were just so good. Um, he's won a bunch of regular season championships. in the ACC and Big 12, Big 8. Kansas was in both. The Big 8 became the Big 12. Um, AP Coach of the Year a couple times, Naismith Coach of the Year, won a bunch of national and conference coaches of the year, and just gets the job done. He's a nice dude, but he's a fierce competitor, and he coaches his players up as well as anybody, and has been tremendously successful. So anyway, that's Roy Williams. He took over for Dean Smith at North Carolina, so they've just had their last two coaches have been all time greats there at North Carolina.